Matteo Pistono. That's your name, isn't it?
It is. Thank you. It was
Yeah.
nice to meet you, Alex.
It's so nice to meet you, and we're super happy to have you on the podcast for Livsenergipodden. So, welcome to your Swedish audience.
Yes. And I have a Swedish connection, actually. It's
Oh,
great. Yeah. I mean, it's very remote, but it was very profound in the arc of my sort of development of my education and whatnot. So I'll tell you about that a bit later.
yeah, please do. I was actually planning on asking you if you have any like Italian connections because Pistono sounds like
Indeed,
Italy.
I do. Yes. Yeah. My grandfather came from Italy and came to America. But then I went back when I was 16 to go to high school.
Yeah.
I did Liceo Scientifico in Ravenna near Bologna. And so I lived there for a year and a half. And then later, my wife and I, we got married near Milano. And so I love my Italian roots. I'm actually just like half Italian. The other side is Irish, the classic American, right? This sort of like combination. But yeah, so I have my Italian side.
Oh, and you are speaking Italian as well.
Yes, I learned it there when I was in high school, and it is stuck. And
Mm.
I try to speak it whenever I can. And here in my community where I live in Southern California now, near just north of San Diego, south of Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And there's a I have a sizable Italian community here that I
Mm.
meet every week, and so I get to speak Italian. I mean, they speak English perfectly, and so they sort of put up with I probably my grammar is not up to par, but they still allow me to speak because I love speaking Italian.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's actually a dream country of mine to live in, or at least parts of the year, be present in. We, me and my husband, we love it, Italy.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of, yeah. So, Matteo, you have written this fantastic book. In English, it's called "Breathe as
Breathe how
How You Want to
want to
Feel."
feel. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm interested. How did you translate that? Did you do a literal translation into Swedish?
kind of.
Yeah.
Andas som du vill må. So it's breathe as you want to feel. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's the direct translation. And I
Yeah.
think it's the most fitting title for the book. I like it a lot.
Yeah. You
Mm.
know, it does capture in all my books I've written a number of books, and I have this feeling that when I do a title of a book, I actually want it to encompass the entire book.
Exactly.
And it's hard to do that. It's hard to find you need a title to work hard, right? And so and this does, especially of all of my books. I mean, I've had good titles before, but this one I love the title of this because it does, what I'm presenting in it. Of
Mm,
course, it's about utilizing the breath. This thing that we do 25,000 times a day.
mm,
Right? We take 25,000 breaths a day,
mm,
and each one of those breaths impacts our nervous system and impacts the way that we feel. If we're
yeah,
feeling elated and happy, or if we're feeling down and lethargic, each of those breaths impacts that,
mm,
right? And so and the way that the world is moving around us, the stressors, the things that stress us out, or even the things that make us happy that are moving around us, they impact our system and they also impact our breath, right?
mm,
So there's this symbiotic relationship between our nervous system and our breath. And most things in our body that function automatically, we can't control. Like right now, Alex, if you try to control your liver or your kidney or even your heart, you can't do it directly. You can't just do it by thinking about it or trying to do something with it. But our breath is one thing that we can do something with.
Mm.
right? It's going to happen automatically. And if we're stressed out, we're going to breathe in a stressed out manner.
Mm.
But if we have the awareness, the mindfulness to just turn our attention onto the breath and do something with the breath, that is, breathe in a different pattern, we can do a whole variety of things. And that's what I write about in the book, to self-regulate.
Yeah.
That is, regulate our nervous system in response to stressors. Because the stressors around us are guaranteed.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
that's just like the nature of life. Like,
Mm.
there's gonna be all the and not only around us, but even within us. As we age, we're gonna find stress, we're gonna find ailments, our body's gonna hurt. There's gonna be all of these things that we don't necessarily want to have happen, but are going to happen.
Yeah.
So this becomes a matter of how we respond to what's happening around us and within us. And, there's this very famous quote by an individual named Viktor Frankl,
Mm.
who he wrote this. He wrote a number of books, but he wrote, between stimulus and reaction, there's a gap. So stimulus, like all of the things that are stimulating us around us, like the stressors. So between stimulus and reaction, there's a gap. And in that gap is where we find our freedom.
Mm.
And he wrote that while he was in Auschwitz,
Yeah.
right? There was, I mean, you can imagine that the kinds of stimulation was horrific, was terrible.
Yeah.
But he recognized it that despite that horrific and terrible and what was happening around him and to him, that he had some agency, that he had some power within him. And that power rests in the ability to have some control over your reaction, that
Mm.
gap.
Exactly.
And that's where this book, Breathe How You Want to Feel, fits in. It
Yeah.
fits into that gap. Like, what do we do in that gap? And that's
Yeah.
what I write about.
That's smart. I really like the analogy or the connection to that. And I'm thinking that freedom space, that's our break. And we can choose how to use that break wisely or just ignorant.
Absolutely. Because if we don't, Alex, then what takes over is just our habitual reaction,
Yeah.
our habits. We've all formed
Where we
habits.
are most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. We are in a reactive mode most of the time. And so that gap, or I call it a pause.
Yeah.
It's a little softer, right? That pause. And what do we do in that pause?
Mm.
Well, we can just turn our attention onto the breath. And like I say, and we can talk about that. We can do a whole variety of things. And we can do it within one, two, or three breaths, and it immediately affects our nervous system. So it affects how we feel.
What I am a little bit sad and sometimes angry about is that we don't use it. That first of all, we take it for granted, our breath, and we don't use it wisely.
Yeah.
And what's nice to our bodies and our minds is to actually think about how we use our breath. It's a
Yeah.
perfect tool of life,
Yeah, it
and
absolutely is. And
we don't
once
take
we
care of it.
because we can have, I don't know in Sweden, but there can be these you can go off and do sort of a breath, like the way that I differ, I think, in my approach is that while you can go off to like a yoga class
Mhm.
and do just an hour of breathing, or if you were to do something where you do this kind of over breathing where you're sort of hyperventilating like a Wim Hof type of style thing. You go off and do that for 30 minutes or an hour. Like, um I don't have anything against that. Like, but it's like you're taking a drug almost, because it makes you feel good. Like, these sessions, they do something to you. They affect your nervous system. And then what ends up happening is, and it makes you feel good, but then you leave that and then you're back in the same place you were before.
Mhm.
And sometimes you want to have that feeling that you had in the class, but you didn't understand or learn the mechanics of breathing, like how to actually do it in the moment. Like when you're stressed, when you get in a traffic jam, or when you step on your kid's toy and it, sends a pain into your foot, or like all of these times when you want to react in a particular way. But if you do, you might regret how you react. That's where I'm offering sort of tools to deal with daily life. So while I enjoy a standalone breathwork session, and I think that it's nice to do, I place more importance on the other sort of 23,500 breaths will be taken during the day, because that is what is going to affect how we live our life,
Mm.
right?
And that's the thing about the book that caught me. So we have published during my 9 years in this business, and we have published two specific breath books before. One by I don't remember her name, Denise, Dennis. Anyways, it's about transformational breath, and then another by Swami Sharadananda, a really nice book as well, but with a yoga thing. This is completely different to me. This is something that I will use in everyday life, and the reason why I picked it was because uh, I know so much about the breath, or how much it means to us in daily life, and how we can affect our lives with the breath, but I don't use it. So I need this kind of practical guidebook for, that I can almost say, okay, this is what I need right now. And I can just turn on, fold it there and
Yes.
do the practice. And then I know that this will help me for the situation coming up in 10 minutes or whatever it is, what I need right now. So for me, it's a way to get the breath to into my daily life, because I was on my way. And in order for me to get the breath work into my daily system, I was thinking, should I go a breathing technique class, or should I go, do the big thing? And I figured I'm never going to do that. Not now, anyway, not where I am in my life right now. So then I found
Yeah.
your book. So, it's synchronicity, it's
Yeah.
time,
Thank
it's
you for sharing
perfect.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Do you think
sharing
it's a
that.
good idea?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is that's the whole reason I wrote this, because my background I've been studying and practicing meditation for nearly 35 years. Like in my 20s, I went to Nepal, and I ended up living there for almost a decade in Nepal and Tibet. And so I was very much into studying both meditation and yoga. And then I ended up going to England and did my master's degree in Buddhist philosophy. So I have this, I very much enjoy the study of the philosophy and all of the different techniques and knowing where everything fits in. But over the last 10 years or so, when I've been teaching meditation, and over the last, especially this last decade, people have been coming to me, and they want to meditate, but their nervous system is so um is so amped, is so overloaded.
Mhm. In need of something.
That the idea of just sitting down and quietly watching the breath go in and out, or focusing on like that just isn't going to happen,
Mm.
because when they sit, their mind is just looping on whatever they're worrying about. And it's understandable. I mean, the world seems a little crazy right now. And so, um, but we can't, if we're stressed out and we continue to be stressed out,
Mm.
and we know that there's ways to help us down regulate, but we don't do them, then we can't blame the world anymore. We
Mm.
have to. My When I was growing up, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains, in a small village in the mountains, And, my dad was a real salt of the earth kind of guy. He was always fishing and hunting and, like, we'd go out and, chop firewood, like, just the image of the mountains. It was sort of like that. And my brother met somebody, and his father was a similar type of character, and he used this phrase, "We have to take part in our own rescue,"
Mhm.
right? We have to take part in our own rescue. And while I think it's very important to have friends, and especially sort of spiritual friends, this kalyana mitra, these like
Mm.
friends who will reflect back to you where you are on your spiritual path, I think that that is like key. It's very important these days. Spiritual friends are much more important than gurus. That's
Yeah,
clear. That is
that's for sure.
very, very clear. That spiritual friends are the ones where we nurture our
Thank you
our
for
path
saying that
within.
because I think a lot of people, especially in our audience, feel quite alone in their interest in the spiritual things.
Mm, yeah. This there's this term in Buddhism called Kalyanamitra, and I'll tell you a story, Alex.
Yeah.
When the Buddha was passing away, he was, he'd been teaching for 35 years. He had his whole community of monks and nuns that are around him, and he was um he was dying. He was like, and he was lying down, and his primary disciple, Ananda, came up to him and they said, "Oh, like, mm, you've given us all the teaching, but tell us that one thing, like, that we need." After he taught for 45 years. And 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 the Buddha sort of just remained silent for a moment. And then Ananda asked again. He said, "Okay, you've taught so much about discipline, and especially because they were monks, they had their sort of vows and whatnot." He said, "Is discipline the most important aspect on the spiritual path?" And the Buddha was there. He was lying on his side, and he said, "No." He said, "Discipline uh, isn't the most important thing on the spiritual path." And then Ananda said, "Well, what about community? Is like spiritual friends, is it like half of the path? Is that what we should spend about half our time on, is cultivating spiritual community?" And the Buddha said, "No, it's not half the path. It's all of the path."
Mm.
So it's very beautiful. We have this term in Buddhism called Sangha. Sangha is sort of the community of practitioners. And in my observation, worldwide, of Buddhist and yogic and spiritual communities, those ones that have a community that's based on trust and nurturing each other are the ones that are going to go into the future. The ones that are more concentrated on a single guru, you know, I
Once
mean,
the
how many
guru
more examples
expires.
do we need
Yeah. No,
of where
that's
that
very
has
true.
gone sideways, and I know it very well. Like, I've been in those communities, and that all that said, though, Alex, I have to also, I pay homage and respect to my teachers that I've had. Like, I wouldn't be here. But this is these two connections to Sweden. I'll tell you about my like, I could say that my most important teacher was Swedish.
Yeah?
So when I was 20, like in my early 20s, I worked in a political campaign in America, and we lost. And so I was like, I want to get away from all of these voters. And I bought a one-way ticket to Kathmandu.
Mhm.
And I had just graduated from college, my undergraduate. And I went to Kathmandu to volunteer to teach English at a school. And the family, or the school, put me up with a Tibetan family, a Tibetan Buddhist family. And they were associated with a sort of monastery, and I went to the monastery, and there was a nun there, and the nun, she'd been there for, like, 30 years, and she was Swedish.
Wow.
Yeah, and her name is she's still alive. I just
Yeah.
asked about her last night, actually, with a friend. Her name is Karen. I don't even know her last name. Ani Karen,
Uh-huh.
and she's at Kopan Monastery, Kopan, Kopan Monastery. She's very elderly now, and she was my first Buddhist teacher. And she when I asked her, like, she was teaching a variety of things, but with me, she sort of suggested I do 2 things.
Yeah.
The first was for meditation practice. She did suggest do this practice called anapanasati. Anapana is just inhale and exhale, and sati means mindfulness. So it's the classic Buddhist instruction of being just placing your attention like you're resting on a wave of the inhalation and the exhalation of the breath. That's it, right? Seems so simple, but of course,
For 1 minute.
yeah, but of course, after 1 or 2 breaths, you start thinking about pasta meal or going skiing or your dog or like whatever. And so it's very instructive, just the simple practice of inhale and exhale, mindfulness of that, of mindfulness of the breath. So she said, start there with mindfulness of the breath. Just do that for a half hour. And then afterwards, because I lived in I had a, where I lived in Kathmandu was near this main river called the Bagmati River, where everybody, when they died in Kathmandu, their family brings them there to be cremated.
Mm. Mm.
So they cremate them along the river on these. They build up a pyre that is a stack of wood. They put the body there, and they sort of do a sort of a bit of a ritual around it, and then they light it on fire, and the family sits there while the body burns.
Mm.
And it's a very public thing. And so Anna Karen said, go down and just sit across the river and just observe, just watch these bodies burn. So these 2 practices
Mm. Yeah.
was mindfulness of the breath, and then I would go down there. So she was teaching me something so key of this principle of impermanence, that everything around us isn't going to last, including this body that I hold so precious and I put lotions on and that I love so much. And that's fine, but it's not going to be here forever. And when we take that awareness with us that we aren't going to be here forever, it changes everything.
Yeah.
And
And
I
going
real
back to your book, Matteo, this is where you're taking us. You're taking us from the beginning of the first breath to the last breath.
to the last breath.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's so cool, because you dare to take us on our last journey
Yeah,
and prepare for that.
for dying,
Mm.
That's it's true because I Alex, I remember really clearly one time I was sitting there watching, and it was obviously a man that was burning, and it's very visceral. I
Mm.
mean, I don't know about in Sweden, but in America, you don't see death unless
No,
you're a nurse,
same here.
and that's something we've lost, because it does give us a certain kind of wisdom to be able to see that regularly. It's a reminder of keeping our priorities straight,
Mm.
right? Death is when we just think I'm going to die, but we don't know when, it immediately changes. It immediately makes whatever argument you had with your husband or wife, it it makes it puts it in a particular perspective, right? But I remember once sitting there and watching this elderly man, and I had this thought that, like, did he in Nepal, they love chai. They love
Yeah,
tea so
tea.
much,
Yeah,
right? And I remember thinking, like, did he know when his last cup of chai was going to be?
yeah.
Because, like, we don't know. Like this, for example, this cup of coffee that I love, I have so much attachment to my coffee. I love my espresso so much. And there's no saying that this isn't going to be my last one. I
No.
can't know that.
So we
So,
need to feel like it's our last.
yeah. So, why not? Even like this, I'm here with a new friend, with Alex, right? It might be my last new friend. So
Yeah.
why not be completely engaged? It's not a morbid. I don't think it's not a to think like that isn't heavy or morbid or
Mhm.
dark. It's quite the contrary.
Yeah.
It sparks us to really engage with whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to
Uh,
share that in the book. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
the thing is, the translator said she had perhaps a tough time with, or she said, well, it was different. The last chapter about breathing the last breath. But to me, when I read it, it's completely different because I see it as we're preparing for death every day with everything that we are experiencing in life. We watch on TV and we have dear dialogues with our friends and about hard things. So we
Yeah.
prepare for death and the end of life every day anyways. And
Yeah.
this way we can actually prepare in a way that makes us be prepared also, not just in the head. It's in all
Yeah.
ways. Mm.
Yeah. I wonder. So in the book, so I'll just tell our book club here, and as you and I spoke about, like if we want to do a whole breathing session together, I'm happy to do that with the book club.
Mm.
But about the book, the way that I structured the book is at the beginning of it, it's it's more about, so I present in the first part one the way that we can utilize the toolkit. Like the if we think about the breath like a toolkit, like what are the tools that we need to hone, or that we need to become specialist in or become very skilled in? And I present these five sort of tools, if you will. And the first tool is awareness. It doesn't actually start with the breath. It starts with this particular kind of awareness I call interoceptive awareness. It's the awareness of how we're feeling at any moment, not how we want to feel or how the podcasts are telling us we should feel or anything. Just like right now, how am I? And based upon that, then we can do things with the breath to adjust. If I'm feeling lethargic and tired, I can use the breath to wake up and become focused and concentrated. If I'm feeling too agitated and stressed, well, we can use the breath to down regulate. Or if we want to use the breath to move into various states of meditation, flow states, or even use the breath before, during, and after we exercise, which is very key. I have a large section on that, like how to breathe while we're exercising. And so I have this, and the way that we can adjust that is essentially using um, the the strength of the breath, like if we're breathing very lightly or strongly, the pace or how quickly or how slowly,
Mm.
and the depth or the volume, if we're taking big, deep breaths or smaller breaths. And these three dials on the art breath, it's not complicated. But once we know how to do it, then we can adjust it accordingly and we can learn how to turn up the volume on our system or turn down the volume on our system. So these are the dials. I call it, this is the second tool, is the dials on our nervous system. The third tool is the difference between breathing through your nose or through your mouth. And it's, I mean, I'll cut to the chase that we should be breathing through our nose all the time. Um, and I go into a lot of depth on why that's important. Of course, if we're doing high intensity exercise,
Mm.
or if we're swimming, then we're gonna have to breathe through our mouth. But apart from there, nasal breathing has many, many benefits, and I go into the science behind it in there. The fourth tool,
I'm all for it.
yeah, I can tell you're a nasal breather
I
as
am.
well. Because when I'm on these Zooms, I observe people as they breathe and as they talk, like right now. I'm I'm talking quickly, I'm excited, and so I'm breathing through my mouth, and you can even see my shoulders are going up. This has an effect on my system.
Mm.
My system is a little bit like, "What's happening? Is there a bear getting ready to, like, attack you because you're getting a little bit excited?" But if I just breathe through my nose, it immediately just
Mm.
calms me down, right? So the fourth tool then is conscious breath holding,
Mm.
like pausing the breath, and I'm not talking about, on the, like when we were kids and holding our breath for as long as we can and squeezing. I'm talking about sub-maximal. That is holding the breath for just short, like maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Because this holding of the breath, either on the inhale or after we exhale, it immediately, our system immediately turns to that and being like, "Why are you doing that?" Because our system is wired to keep breathing, right? But we
Yeah.
can intervene. That's the whole point of these breathing interventions, is being able to intervene and affect our nervous system. And so the breath holding, if we, for example, if we take a big inhale and we hold our breath at the top and we hold, continue to hold for 10 or 20 seconds, this is, generally speaking, is going to bring us more energy and more focus. If we exhale and hold our breath, this generally down regulates. So if we combine these, we can combine them, we can do them separately. Knowing how to use the breath holding I use breath holding all the time. It's one of the main things I do to regulate my nervous system
Yeah.
throughout the day. Yeah, conscious breath
And
holding,
it's
not,
so easy though.
it's so easy.
But I never really understood what happens. I could understand that, yeah, it does have an effect on your nervous system, but how? I didn't
Yeah.
know, at the up and the down. Mm.
Yeah, and for those of the listeners who have studied, done pranayama,
Mm.
various yogic techniques, or as you said, transformational, maybe this holotropic breathing, or
Mm.
they've jumped in, they've done the Wim Hof breathing before they jump in the ice bath. My book explains what is actually happening,
Mm.
and why you'd want to do that and why you might not want to do that.
Yeah.
I've had breathe clients come to me and be like, they're really, really stressed. They're almost like they're so stressed, and they come to me because they want to sort of like have not so much stress and be able to sleep at night. And then they tell me that they do Wim Hof breathing every morning. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Not that Wim Hof breathing is bad,
No,
but
no, no.
that and for those of you who don't know, Wim Hof breathing is where you hyperventilate.
Mm.
As if, like I said, as if a bear comes into your house. And what happens when we, even just that, just those 4 breaths I just did, I feel my pulse in my head, you know? We can affect our system immediately. And so we need to do that skillfully. This is the key, Alex, that we have to apply these things skillfully, because the breath is like a medicine, and it's dose dependent. Sometimes we need to do it for longer periods. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 breaths, right? And let me just say, the last tool is integration. And this is what you started the podcast with, is that we have to remember to actually do it, right? Because we can have all the knowledge, but if we don't actually do it, and I'll give you an example.
Mm.
Last night, like before, or it was 3 nights ago, um, before I was sitting down to have a meal with my wife, and things were a little tense. Because life happens. And so, if little tense and if I'm stressed and I sit and then I eat, I'm not gonna digest very well. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna be in this, my system is in an elevated state. That is to say that I'm not quite in the fight or flight mode, but I am stressed.
Mm.
And when I'm stressed, my body sends blood to the arms, into the hands, away from the belly. It doesn't want to, it does, in a stressed out state, we don't digest. We also turn off we're not going to have to go to the bathroom at all. It turns off that system, right? And in that mode that at that time is not a good time to try to have anything that is going to give us nutrition,
Mm.
right?
Oh.
And
Mm.
so what do I do? I'm sitting there, and we just, before we ate and we recognized it, we paused, we put our tongue on the roof of our mouth.
Mm.
You just touch the tongue on the roof of the mouth, close the lips, and just breathe lightly in and out of the nose and extended our exhale. And after 4 or 5 breaths, you'll feel a sweetness come into your mouth. And this is just physiological. This is not mystical. It'd be nice if it was mystical, but it's just physiology, in that you're telling your system it's all okay. Things are okay, and you can rest and digest. You don't have to be in this fight or flight mode. And that sweetness is your digestive juices beginning to come online.
It came.
Yeah, it comes immediately.
Mm.
People think that when I'm getting these things, I'll say things like that, like, "Oh, is there sweetness?" And they'd be like, "Are you clairvoyant?" I was like, "No, it has nothing to do with that." It'd be nice if I was clairvoyant,
Yeah,
but I'm
maybe
not.
perhaps it's a tool to get rid of the sweet tooth.
Exactly.
Kidding, kidding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have these 5 tools in the
Yeah.
first part of the book, that's part 1, and then part 2 of the book applies these 5 tools to life, to when we get stressed or when we wanna downregulate or when we do wanna get concentrated, when we do want to like before the podcast, it's early morning for me, so before this so even though I was having my espresso here, I wanted to become more focused and more concentrated. So for 1 minute before I clicked, connect on the Zoom to you, Alex, I did a breathing practice where I elevated my energy. Not
That's
so
what I
much
wanna learn.
so what's that?
I wanna learn that one.
Yeah, and it's not yeah, I mean, we can even do one right now. It's the one I have right at the beginning of the book because it tends to do this.
Yeah,
So it's
let's
something called
do
a
it.
physiological sigh.
Yeah. Yeah, sigh.
Yeah, and so let me explain what it is because and then we'll do it together. But what and we can all do this, all the listeners, if you're
Yeah.
listening or seeing this, is what we're just going to inhale through the nose and take a long, slow inhale to expand our lungs completely. And not so much so that when you do it, your nostrils collapse. So you're not going to go be rather, you're just going to breathe in fully, and then you're going to pause for a moment and then you're going to top it off. You're going to do a second inhalation and expand your lungs completely. And then you're going to hold for a moment and then you're going to exhale. And some people exhale out the mouth and sigh out. That's fine. You can also sigh out your nose if you like. So it's going
In
to
the
be
book, it
something like
says,
this.
slowly, like you're breathing out a candle.
Yeah. And you can even purse your lips if you like. So it's going to look something like this. You're going to inhale, you're going to inhale, and then you're going to top it off. Okay? It's easy. There's nothing
And
like
you do
super
that over and over again for a
so
minute
not
or
over, maybe 3 or 5 times, but we're gonna do it right now for 3
yeah.
we're gonna do it for 3 times. And so let's just for a moment just pause,
Mhm.
right? And you can even close your eyes for a moment and just notice how you feel. Just notice the sensations. And then through the nose, we're gonna inhale fully, pause, and then top it off. Let the breath land. We're gonna do that 2 more times. Inhale fully through the nose, filling your lungs up completely. Then pause. Then top it off. Relax the face. Let the breath land. Relax your shoulders. We're going to do that one more time. Inhale. Pause. Top it off. Exhale out. Closing your eyes. Let the breath land. Breathe normally and just notice how you feel. And then we can come back.
It definitely there is something happening, in the body. You get I feel heat. I feel, energy in my head. I was thinking perhaps it's an awake state that has kind of
Turned
uh,
on.
turned on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's happening?
yeah.
So the feeling that we have that you just described is how you felt. And I think it's wonderful that you described it in terms of sort of the felt experience, the heat and the energy, and this sort of like this sort of um, and physiologically, what's happening is that when we inhale fully and then we expand our lungs again, our lungs are made up of these little tiny sacs. They look like grapes
Yeah.
called alveoli. And when
Yeah.
we take that second inhalation, we expand all of our alveoli. That alveoli is the is the pathway through which oxygen enters our bloodstream. Okay? And then as we hold, because we've expanded our lungs, it actually puts pressure on our internal organs, including our heart. So some people feel the heartbeat when you're holding your breath. And this type of this, and our lungs are expanded, this physiological state that we've put ourselves into turns on, it increases our blood pressure because our heart is being squeezed. And so it immediately gives us more energy. It turns on our system, right? And that slight pause at the top of our breath, being full, we're just pausing for we didn't even pause, maybe not even 5 seconds, but that slight pause altered, and I talk about this. We won't get totally into it because I'm a bit of a science nerd on blood chemistry, but we
Mm.
slightly altered our blood chemistry and we delivered more oxygen that's in our blood to our brain and to our system. And so then when we feel afterwards, we just feel more awake. And we might not know why, but we just do.
Yeah.
And that was with 3 breaths.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing.
It's amazing. We can alter it, we can just change. And that's why to get back to the very, we can breathe how we want to feel.
Exactly. And you know what? When you describe this now, what comes to me is that we are hugging ourselves internally.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
like that hugging that
The
well, what we're
lungs are,
actually doing
they're
is
pushing
yeah.
and they're kind of wrapping us up in a warm squeeze.
Yeah, I described it as a internal massage.
Yeah.
But the hugging is nicer. Yeah, I should have had you as my editor, Alex. I could have used that, a bit softer. Yeah. So we have this so we can intervene
Mhm.
with our breathing anytime during the day or right before we sleep, or even if we wake up in the middle of the night, to do something to our nervous system. And that's the skill that I'm offering with the book, right? I'm offering many different ways, and that's what we discuss in the book. There's many exercises and techniques and methods. There isn't one. Like there isn't just like a holotropic breathing or, Buteyko breathing. Or it's having you understand your own breath, and then you become the skilled physician for your internal state,
Yeah.
right? So
We
that's what I
counted to more than 20 exercises.
yeah, yeah, and if anybody here, I recorded the audiobook in English, and all of those exercises, and I put a sort of soundscape behind them, but I also record guided practices, and so and for the book club, if I can send you I don't know how the distribution can happen, but I can send audio, it would be in English. Sorry, I don't speak Swedish,
Yeah, but
but,
there is a
if
QR code in the book that we still have, so they can access
yeah,
every.
that comes to me. It comes
Yeah.
to
Oh,
matteopistono.com, and then if you do that, then I'll send you guided practices. So if you go to matteopistono.com and just sign up, there you go. There's not a big sort of corporation, it's just me. I can send you the actual guided audio practices, and because some people like that, they like to have that auditory experience of being guided in a practice. Some people prefer not to have that or just sort of see it in a book.
yeah.
So, Alex, we have these first 2 parts, right? The toolkit, and then the part 2 is applying it. So the book is like breathe how you want to feel, and the second part is I envision like breathe how you want to live.
Mm,
And then to loop back to what we were just saying,
yeah.
part 3 of the book is it might take some readers a little bit by surprise because I didn't put it on the cover, and that was a conscious decision as well. But the last part is breathe how you want to die.
Yeah.
And that is, there's some contemplations on how to live right now. So things in Buddhism, we every day we contemplate the impermanent nature of life and that death. The main point from the Buddhist perspective is that we just remind ourselves we are going to die,
Mm,
and that's just a fact. But the kicker is that we don't know when.
mhm. Exactly. So we have to live at the fullest all the time.
That's why we enjoy the conversation like this or this cup of coffee or when I see my dog and my wife, like this is it is every single moment is precious because we don't know how long it's going to be, right?
Exactly.
And so what do we do? Like how can we where does the breath come into that? And so my practice and study and something that the Swedish nun taught me are these contemplations on the impermanent nature of life.
Mm,
That as the Stoics would say, memento mori, right? Remember, I will die.
yeah.
And how that then colors the way that we see our life and the way that we engage. So I have that. That's the first part. And then there's an actual practice of rehearsing our death. Because it's been one of my main practices for the past 30 years.
Mhm.
Is I just rehearse it. Like and it's again, it's not something that I feel is very dark. It's quite the contrary. I mean, I'm not looking forward to dying, but hopefully when it does happen, I will go into that experience as lucid as I can be.
Yeah.
Because I've thought about it before and I'm not necessarily I can't say that I don't have any fear, but I have a little bit of interest
Yeah.
because nobody knows, all of my teachers have told me what happens
Mm,
beyond death. And with
mm.
all due including the Dalai Lama, with all due respect, like they don't know.
They're not dead.
They don't know. And no, on all the religions, they have something to say about what is beyond, but nobody actually knows. And so um I want to just go in with as lucid and aware as possible because if there is something beyond, like I want to experience it totally and completely. And if not, well, then there's not. But I'm more concerned right now about living this because this is the only thing that's real right
Yeah.
here. Like
Mm. Yeah.
Alex and me right now in my espresso. It's the only thing that's like real right here, right now.
Yeah.
And so I try to, and the breath is, I describe the breath in there like a loyal companion.
Yeah.
It's always there with us. And then we can turn to it, rely upon it when we need to change things. And then we don't pay attention, it's
Mm,
still there supporting us.
mm. All the time. Loyal companion, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Mm,
Super friend.
yeah.
We're not treating it very well all the time, though.
No, we need to, yeah.
Mm.
That's why our respiratory system, I talk about in the book about how to give ourselves massages, like massaging our diaphragm. Like the diaphragm is an extraordinary muscle in the body that is that muscle that sort of bisects our abdomen and that breathes us. Like it's
Mm.
like right now I'm not being aware of my breath so much because I'm talking, but the diaphragm is moving up and down, breathing us. And I even talk about in the book sometimes like, we want to intervene with the breath sometimes, we want to control it, we want to do certain things, and then other times we wanna step back and observe the breath breathing you,
Yeah.
and it's a very freeing moment, and
You
that
know
I
what I
for
do when I do that? When you say that, I realize I always am very, how do you say, harsh to myself. Because I
Mm.
always, when I'm watching my natural state of breathing, I kind of always notice that I'm not breathing well enough. Like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Well, so yeah, Alex. Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah, I have a feeling that that's not the only time that you're self-critical.
No,
No.
no.
Yeah.
But I think, when we're stressing around in life and you know that the breathing would help you and you're not using your breath as you could. And then, when you just lay down and let your body breathe, you can see all the faults and the mistakes that you're not taking care of.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Alex, I mean, and I'm sure you're not alone in this because but this is I think let's talk about this for a moment because okay, in the breathe how you want to feel, um, there's lots of tools and techniques, and there's also a lot of learning that we can do about how we might not be breathing in the most optimal way for our body and for our spirit and for our mind, right? In a similar way that when we study meditation, or and with your community, there's many different things that people are studying
Mhm.
that of tools along the spiritual path, that those tools, we need to apply them sort of appropriately, skillfully, because I mean, in especially within meditation, oftentimes the first thing that people say is, "I can't meditate because I'm too distracted." Right? And they sort of then use meditation to beat themselves up, right? They use the technique that is supposed to be liberating to beat themselves up.
Yeah.
So, I would just suggest for those of us who do this, uh, to be very gentle on yourself. Like, very like, listen, I know my breath is like, you know, I'm doing all the things that Matteo says not to do in Breathe How You Want to Feel, but I need to just take a pause now and just be gentle. And step by step, I can begin adjusting
Mm.
because we don't want to use the spiritual path to beat ourselves up.
No, I'm
No, and
sad
some of
that
us
actually.
definitely do that, you know?
Yeah.
And
I
because
think
we're
that.
all, you know, the first thing I just read the Dalai Lama's most recent book.
Mhm.
And it's not a dharma book, it's about his book about his sort of, like, life and, about his sort of dealings with the Chinese, but he does have this one chapter, he says and he doesn't get really into the Buddhist technique so much, but he says, "The very first thing that we all need to do is remind ourselves that we need to recognize that we're trying."
Yeah.
And that's a huge step. Because if we don't do that, then we can do this thing where we're like, "Oh, man, like, I'm breathing through my mouth, and I'm upper chest breathing, I'm, like, doing this thing, not" and then that's appropriate sometimes because we also on the other side, we don't wanna become so lax that nothing really matters.
Yeah.
We can just like, it doesn't we don't have any agency. Like, that's definitely not me, as I said early on, that take part in your own rescue.
Yeah.
This
That's a
book
big one.
for me is what I'm trying to give to people so they can take part in their own rescue,
Yeah.
but not to use it to beat yourself up, Alex.
No, I have to get away from that. I know. I know.
Yeah.
Another have to.
Yeah. And this is where spiritual community comes into play, I think. Because if we tell our certain individuals within our community, "Hey, remind me." Like,
Yeah.
remind me, like, I notice that I am too self-critical.
Mm.
So just can you remind me on occasion
Mm.
to do, to be more compassionate towards myself, to use the very soft breathing techniques in Mateo's book, not the ones that are going to make me more aggro, more
Mm.
type A. I mean, you're a publisher, so you have that drive. Like when I meet publishers and CEOs, and they all have this strong drive. which is awesome. That's your
Mm.
disposition. So then use that skillfully with
Mm.
the breath.
Yeah. I also want to say something about the last part of the book that is
Yeah, please.
about preparing for death. Because to me, there's a lot of thankfulness in that part. You
Mm,
know, when we are preparing, we are preparing in a way where we are very conscious and we can see things, which also alerts thankfulness, to be thankful for what we have here and now. Does that
yeah.
resonate with you about that chapter?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's, and not everybody in these podcasts I've done, not everybody goes there to the last chapter.
No?
Yeah, the last part of the book.
I want to make it accessible because it's not it I think perhaps people would think it's weird or hard, but to me
Yeah,
it's not. It's not about that. It's
yeah,
about something else.
yeah. It is my overarching, um, emotion that I want to have drawn out from part 3 especially is one of gratitude.
Yeah, that's the word. That's the right word.
Yeah,
Mm.
and for us to have gratitude, for gratitude to arise, it seems to me as though there needs to be a letting go of the things that we don't need to be thinking about, right? All of the critiques and all of this edge. When we let go of that, then gratitude can arise. And the main practice, if you will, in that part 3 is one of letting go. Letting go or just even letting be.
Mm.
However things are, they already are that way.
Yeah.
So we just allow them to be.
Yeah.
And this is going to be important when we get older or when we're passing away, is we can't. And for anybody who has sat with anybody, a parent or a loved one or a friend or anybody, and watching them pass away, you'll see this, that there's nothing that can be done. That's the way that it goes.
Mm.
And in that, if we try to hold on, that it's futile.
Yeah.
So right now we can practice that letting go
Yeah.
on every exhale. 25,000 times a day, we can actually practice letting go. And then on the inhale, we're full of life. So this vacillation between the inhale, which fills us with the very essence of life, the inhale, and then letting go totally on the exhale. Because, Alex, when we exhale, there's no guarantee we're going to inhale,
No.
right?
That's very true. So,
So why not totally let go on the exhale
mm,
and then be amazingly thankful when we inhale? Amazing. And then we can go out and share that amazement with our family and our friends and our community, like ripple it out. That enjoyment that we're here, that I get to see the bougainvillea right here in my window, like blossoming in springtime. Amazing. And then let go of not trying to hold on to any experience either
no.
on the exhale.
Yeah.
And we can, this is my main meditation practice, is this flux, is watching this happen. Um, and I had to learn how to let go on the exhale because of my yogic training, because of my pranayama training. I trained a lot in this breathing in yoga, that I would very much control my exhale. I
Yeah.
literally, some of us that you will know this practice called ujjayi breathing, where
Yeah.
you make this ocean-like sound in the back of your throat. So there's
Yeah.
a kind of a constriction in the back of your throat. I've had to unlearn doing that
Yeah. I can imagine. So
because
whenever
I
I'm
like,
trying to do a breathing technique, I kind of I find myself there with the ujjayi.
yeah.
And that's not
Ujjayi's
perhaps
very like that. Talk about a hugging of the self.
yeah,
It does feel good, but at some point, being able to totally, and this, Alex, it might be very good for you because you have this. There's a tendency when we do that to trying to control things.
yeah, exactly.
We're trying to even control our breath, and I am like that. I'm very, I'm not very controlling, but I do like to, if I'm gonna try to take part in my own rescue, I like to set things up around my situation to optimize that,
Yeah,
including my breath. But sometimes just letting go completely, and it's letting go like, you know, like when an old man is sitting there on the beach and he's watching the children play sandcastles and they get like destroyed by the water and the kids are like, oh, it's crazy, they cry or they're all caught up in the story. And the old man is there. It's all good. The story's still there,
mm,
but he just doesn't is not he recognized that it's happening, but he's just not involved with it.
yeah,
He's just sitting there. This is the type of feeling at the end of the exhale where there might be a story happening, but it just isn't the involvement with it. And it sounds so simple. And the breath can lead us there.
yeah,
And then at some point, we let go of the method. And I talk about that a fair bit on the section on meditation about when we arrive at a particular state in the practice of meditation or with whatever spiritual practices that you're doing, to let go of the method,
mm.
right? Because
And just do.
when we talked about Italy, if you have a map, because the techniques that we're talking about are just maps.
Mm,
They're maps, they're internal maps to lead us in a particular direction, and we need that sometimes. We need to point ourselves in a particular direction. And that map, like if we're going to see the Colosseum in Rome, we have a map to get us on our little Vespa and we go through the streets. And then when we arrive at the Colosseum and it has a little Colosseum on the map, we don't continue to look at the map to try to experience the Colosseum. We've arrived.
yeah,
So we put down the the way that we got there
mm,
and we just experience. So in a similar way, it takes some in awareness to realize when we've arrived in a particular state of meditation or otherwise, just to let go of the practice
yeah,
and be within the flow of whatever's arising because we've arrived. To apply a method at the time is unskillful.
yeah.
Yeah. It's actually, and it's also the seed of dogma.
Dogma. The
These
root
just
and
doing
root.
things dogmatically.
Yeah, yeah,
You're just doing things because you read it in Matteo's book. Don't
yeah.
like don't do it just because it's in this book or because I said it on the podcast. Like do it, become skillful at it, but then when you need to let go, totally let go. Because you, the listener,
Internalize the practice.
yeah,
Yeah,
we have everything within us already. This book, Breathe How You Want to Feel, and other books by Swamiji, who you published, or Denise, or all the other ones that you're reading in the book club, they're all just different maps.
yeah. That's
They're just
true.
maps that are pointing us in a particular direction.
Mm,
But the fruition,
mm,
the manifestation of wisdom, of compassion, of all of these attributes that we're trying to cultivate are not in the book. None of those are in my book.
mm.
My map is a direction to some of them.
Yeah. And it's all different for all of us, what
Yeah.
we want to
It's all
achieve,
within
what
you.
we need. Yeah.
It's all of these, the qualities that we're trying to cultivate, they're already present.
Yeah.
We're just trying to remove some of the veils to have them completely come out. And for me, the key is the breath,
Mm,
because the breath, utilizing the breath in the way that we do, in these practices or in pranayama, it requires no belief. It doesn't
No,
require
it's very
it's
in your
immediate.
face, actually. It's
Yeah, it's
you can see it.
immediate.
Mm.
It's immediately the felt experience. You know, that when we just did those 3 breaths together, you talked about a felt experience. You didn't say, "Well, I think that this made me believe in this higher power, or this deity, or the Buddha, or this." The mind doesn't go there. The mind stays within the somatic experience
Mhm.
of now.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, Alex, we are in the past. We're worrying about the past or ruminating about the past, or we're sort of fearful or something about the future. But these practices bring us into this
I love
ever
how
change.
you also describe the physiology of what's happening in the body, because when you can see that happening, the grape formed lungs and what happens when you puff it up a little bit
Yeah,
extra, you know, and you can actually see what's happening inside, and then it becomes real. It's not a theory anymore. It
yeah,
is real. So when you internalize those methods and make them yours and experience them, then perhaps it's easier to let go of the method.
exactly.
Mm.
I totally exactly. This embodiment is what I'm trying to but we have to practice a little bit.
Yeah.
We have to play with the breath. I invite people in that like to have we don't have to be super, super serious about it. I mean, we can be, but we also have fun with the breath. We can do
Yeah.
weird things with the breath. We hold our breath for a long time or short times and we sort of see how it makes us feel. And then we become more of an adept, like a carpenter. Like, a carpenter has many different tools that he uses when he
Mhm.
goes to build a house. He's got all of these different tools. He doesn't show up to a job site and not know how to use a tool and then try to use it.
No.
That's why I encourage people when to develop to develop their toolkit before the stressors hit.
Mm.
Right? So we practice them in, while we're reading and in our quiet time and whatnot. So then and I'll give you an example of this. Because everybody asks me for like, what do I do when I'm stressed? Give me
Mhm.
a breathing technique. And of course, we're all a little bit different. So there isn't one technique, but we all are human beings. We all have a similar nervous system. So I have this one of the practices that I offer in the book is called mnemonic nasal breathing. Mnemonic is a word. Um, it's a Latin-based word that means to remember, right? And so it has 3 steps, and it's very easy. Like, the first is that when something stresses us out, or if we're moving into a situation that's going to stress us. Like, for example, if we're gonna have to if we get nervous before we speak in public, or before we talk to our boss on a Zoom call, or before we move on to the freeway that's going to make us very stressed while we're driving, something like this. Whatever situation that if we know that we're moving into a stressful situation that stresses us out, usually we do this. The very first step is we put the tongue on the roof of the mouth, right? So we put it behind the teeth, but not touching the teeth, right? Some people's tongue goes all the way up on the palate. Some people the tip of the tongue only touches the right behind the front teeth,
Yeah.
and is not pressing, not stress. We just have it there. And I'll tell you about why we do this in a moment, okay? So the tongue goes to the roof of the mouth, and and then the mind, then that's the reminder to put our attention on the breath. So we find the breath wherever we are in the breathing cycle, whether we're inhaling or exhaling, we find the breath, right? And then on our next exhale, which is usually within 1 second, we just extend the exhale a little bit longer. So the second step is extend the exhale. And then on the next inhale, the third step is we apply a mantra or a word or a affirmation that we've already decided upon. And we say it in our mind once on the inhale. And as we exhale, and we do that a few times, right?
We say it both on the inhale and in the
Yeah.
out.
So I try to, I want to be joyful
Mhm.
in life. Like that's like,
I think
and
you
so
are.
these days, my mantra, my phrase, or you know, it's interesting. The word mantra, is, of course, is a Sanskrit word, and usually refers to the reciting of a phrase like om or
Mm.
a whole. They have various lengths of mantras. In Tibetan, the way they translated that word, they translated it into a phrase that means that which protects the mind.
Mhm.
So it protects us from ourself, right? It protects us from doing the usual monkey mind
Yeah.
thing, right? So
Yeah,
when we
that's
play,
different.
so my mantra is in English. I just say, I am joy.
Mm.
Not that and I recommend if you say it in your native language, that you say it in you say it not in a hopeful way. You say it in the present tense. I am joy. Not I hope to be joyful. No, I am joy right here with whatever as I'm in the all of the difficulties, I'm still joy. So what happens is before I turn onto the freeway, and it's usually that for me, it's driving, which stresses me out. I put my tongue on the roof of the mouth. I find the breath wherever I am, and then I am joy. I am joy. Just a few times. So this technique, these 3 steps, tongue, extend the exhale, and mantra,
Mm.
combined, which takes
Yeah.
place very quickly. It can take place within the course of one breath, and then you do it for 3 or 5 breaths or longer. It will immediately downregulate your system. And why is that? Or how is that? How does that happen? Well, when we put the tongue on the roof of the mouth, the principal nerve in the body that starts in the base of the brain and it comes out around our ears, through our ears actually, and over the roof of the mouth, and then extends down below our belly, is this nerve called the vagus nerve.
Mm.
And the vagus nerve is as I said, it's the principal nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and relaxation mode. So when we stimulate that nerve, it tells our body it's all safe. You don't have to dump cortisol and adrenaline into the system. Rather, you can relax, you know? You can relax the body, you can relax the muscles in the body and whatnot. So we can do this. We signal when we put the tongue on the roof of the mouth, we're signaling to the body that we're safe.
Mm.
And our body will react in the various ways that it does. And the reason that is that that tongue on the roof of the mouth, it stimulates the vagus nerve, right?
Mm.
So that is the first step. There's other ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. When we hum or when we say om, the vibration in the ear is stimulating the vagus nerve,
You can almost
right?
feel that, it's
Yeah.
going back.
So, but not to get distracted on that. So we do the first step is the tongue on the roof of the mouth stimulates the vagus nerve, and then and then we find the exhalation. And generally speaking, when we put the attention on the breath, we control it a little bit. And that's why I say, and that control is fine in that because we're going to extend the exhale. When we breathe out for longer than we breathe in, that too turns on the rest and digest mode of the nervous system, right? So if we breathe in, you don't have to count, although if you want to, you can. It sort of competes with the mantra. But in the book, I talk a lot about ratio breathing. Like
Yeah.
if we breathe in for a 4 count and out for a 6 count, that is generally relaxing. If we flipped it, if we breathed in for a 8 count and out for a 2 count, that would be very, it would excite the system. Something like,
I can almost feel it. Yeah.
right, that brings all kind of energy into the system, and it doesn't have to be that extreme. So we can utilize these. Some of our listeners may have heard of box breathing,
Mm.
where you breathe in for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count, exhale for a 4 count, and then once again hold at the bottom for a 4 count. So you're breathing in this box-like manner. So that's a very balancing kind of breath, and it brings a kind of focus, but spaciousness, right? So, and I might say even in Sweden, you guys have some of the best biathletes in the world. The ones that like are cross country skiing and they're
Yeah.
skating, and then they stop. They stop, they lean over, and they're able to immediately control the breath. And I refer to these biathletes in this book because they do the same techniques that we're talking about here. They extend their exhale, and then at the bottom of their exhale, they pause their breath for a moment, and that is a very, very still place that is
Mm.
very spacious, very concentrated, with no movement, and then they pull the trigger. They
Mm.
are able, and they, I don't talk about this in the book, but those biathletes, they are so, they hone their breath and their heartbeat so much that they actually pull the trigger in between heartbeats.
I can
Like,
imagine because they need to be in focus when they're
yeah.
doing the shot. Yeah.
And they're able to do that just like that. So in
Yeah.
a similar way, we put our tongue on the roof of the mouth, we extend our exhale because the extended exhale calms our system down. And then we just place the mantra on the, and this is, we could talk a lot about this, about what the mantra does or what the word does or phrase. But, in short, it is changing the narrative,
Yeah.
right? I'm pulling onto the interstate. I can immediately tell myself, this traffic is always bad going to Los Angeles. There's always so many crazy drivers. This was this way last week. They haven't fixed the roads. All of the story,
Mhm.
none of which necessarily is true at that moment, but it's on. That's the story I'm telling myself. So what am I going to change? I'm going to change the channel. I am joy. I am joy. And when we change this, when we change our thoughts, the world around us changes
Yeah.
because
Very,
of
very true.
because of the filter through which we are perceiving them.
Yeah. We just have to catch ourselves in that bad
Exactly.
moment or in that
Yeah.
moment where we're
And that's
catch
it's
ourselves and
exactly exactly. And this is the very first thing you said. It's that pause
mm,
in between stimulus and reaction.
reaction.
We're putting the pneumonic nasal breathing. So in between stimulus and before we react, our tongue is on the roof of the mouth. We've already extended our exhale and we're joyful.
That's a second, that's a 1 second technique that you could
And it
obviously
changes
do for
everything.
longer. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good
because
one.
that what is that going to do? It's going to allow us to sleep better at night
Yeah,
because we won't have dumped all of those stress hormones into our system that take hours and hours to metabolize.
yeah.
So we'll be able to sleep better at night. And then what's going to happen? We're going to enjoy our cup of coffee with our wife or our daughter or our
Mm,
son more because we will have rested well. And then instead of the cycle
mm,
of stress ruling our life, we have more agency.
mm. Yeah. So, I know that we're over time, and I hope that you're okay with it.
I'm okay. Like
Good.
you can tell, Alex, I love talking about these things. I love doing them and I love talking about them.
Yeah, so I have a few questions more. So,
Yeah, please.
um, my cat wakes me up at night, sometimes
Mm,
uh, short before I should actually stand up for the day. And if I have if I can get that last hour of sleep, I'm really happy. So, but sometimes it's hard because, when you wake up an hour or an hour and a half before the clock should go off, all you can think about is that clock. So, is this technique that you just taught me a smart one to use at that time to get back to
Yeah.
sleep?
Oh, I love the question. I love how you asked the question.
Yeah.
Is it a smart one? Like, so because there are many different techniques, so if I said to you, some people might say do whatever. Well, let me just answer the question.
Yeah.
So, is it a smart one? So, what happens when we apply the mantra? We are using our concentration, our focus, and that focus wakes us up a little bit. So,
So
I'm not going to suggest that you do the mnemonic nasal breathing to go back to sleep, right?
good.
It does relax the system in the face of a stressor. But what you're asking about is that the stressor isn't really there. What you just want to do is that you want to go back to sleep. So the one that I recommend, what I recommend, if you wake up for insomnia, or for if you just wake up in the middle of the night, or if you have to go to the bathroom and then you come back, is something a little bit more somatic based. So in whatever position you are, if you're on your back, or even if you're on your side, if you place your hand on your belly, right? So just around your abdomen, and then as you're lying there, just find the feeling of the movement of the breath. There'll be a slight expansion on the inhale. The breath will go down. You don't need to be changing your breath a lot of this time. Just feel the breath. And then if you count however long you inhale, so you might inhale for a 3 or 4 count, just exhale for a 2 or 3 count more on the exhale, okay? So, and what's happening, because you like to know what's actually happening, we say in English, "under the hood," meaning,
Yeah.
like, you look under what's happening in the car. What's actually happening there is that, 1, you're taking your attention and you're placing it within the body rather than within the rumination of the mind, and you're feeling, and generally speaking, for people, feeling your own breath is soothing, right? Feeling the movement of your breath, it's a soothing, it's a technique. That's why sometimes, you'll have, like, people will say, like, just hold yourself like this and breathe into your arms. It feels good to feel that internal massage, that movement. So it's soothing.
Yeah.
The breathing out for breathing longer than you're breathing in, as I said, that immediately turns on that rest and digest mode. And the last thing is counting of the breath
Mhm.
is it's an amazing technique, in that the same part of the brain that ruminates, that worries, the part of the brain that worries, is the same part of the brain that counts.
Ah.
And we can't do them at the same time. So you're just skillfully distracting yourself from worrying about not being able to sleep for the next hour, or thinking, or criticizing your cat for doing that thing, or thinking about what, your to-do list already at 5 o'clock in the morning. So you're just distracting yourself with one, two, three, one, two, three, four, five, one. Just that.
Mm.
It's very gentle. So this is one of the things I recommend for waking up in the middle of the night, is hand on the belly, so feeling yourself, feeling
Mm.
the breath, um, and then just placing a light count and breathe out for a little bit longer than you breathe in.
It sounds like a smart technique.
Yeah, I have a section on here about things to do before you sleep and things to do if you wake up during the night. But I have to also say this, that if you're having if any of the listeners are having a challenging time sleeping with sleep in general, and I don't know how it is in Sweden, but it's in the health and wellness world, it's the number one concern in America.
Yeah,
It's the most searched for term, sleep.
sleep.
Like how to,
Yeah.
and so um,
But
you
it's kind
know,
of boring to work with the sleep. I
yeah,
think
but it's
it's
so important
common.
because if we're not resting well, we won't have the energy. And so I talk about how to sleep with your mouth closed. If you're snoring, if you're snoring, you need to deal with that immediately. You need to find a way not to snore. And there are the CPAP machines in these, but if we talk about ways not to have that happen or not to go to that direction, and I'm not saying that that sleep doctors and CPAP, there's anything wrong with them, but there's things that we can do beforehand,
Yeah.
and that's principally breathing through your nose all the time, including when you're sleeping. And
Yeah.
so I talk a fair bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sister and her husband, they are working a lot with the nasal breathing, also for, long running sessions,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I do the same thing on my I'm I do long distance mountain bike
Yeah.
races,
Oh,
like multi-day
yeah.
races, and
Cool.
breathing through your nose as much as possible. It's amazing what happens, the amount of energy that you conserve by breathing through your nose. That is to say that you aren't wasting energy by mouth breathing while you're pedaling or while you're running, but also in the recovery mode, being able to recover. And this we get way into the physiology and what's happening with the oxygen and carbon dioxide within the blood and the delivery of oxygen to the tissues and to the brain. So I talk a little bit about that. It's one thing I love. I love getting into these things.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about you that we haven't met yet. A few questions about you, Matteo.
Uh huh.
What other interests do you have beside breathing techniques, meditation, yeah, and long distance mountain biking?
Yeah. My life really revolves around spending time with my family
Mhm.
and my little dog, which I have so much attachment to and
What
will
kind of
have an
dog?
incredible time letting go of. He's 15, but so I have so my family, like I spend a lot of time with my wife and my dog. And then every day I'm either mountain biking or surfing. I go in the ocean
Mm,
because I live just a few miles from the ocean, so I surf, and or I'm on my mountain bike, and then I still have my meditation practice and my study of Buddhism is very dear to me. It's very important to me. So I do every day. I have my meditation practice and as I write in the book, I use my breathing practice to set myself up
yeah.
for my meditation.
Mm,
So right before my meditation session, I just examine how I'm feeling. If I need some energy, I'll do a quick breathing thing to do that. If I need to sort of down regulate, I'll do that. And so that, and then I guess the other thing I love to do is I just cook. I
yeah.
love I love to cook, and so I cook like all of our meals. Like, I cook all of our meal I mean, my wife cooks as well, but we cook all the time but I sort of take it on, and I love my Italian heritage when it comes to cooking,
Yeah.
so I cook a lot of Italian and Indian food.
Oh, nice. Oh, we had the most marvelous Indian dinner the other day at a friend's house. And it's not very common to be invited for an Indian dinner. Normally,
Right.
that's what we kind of eat we go to a lunch restaurant here, but we seldom cook Indian food, but it's so good.
Yeah, it's so nourishing, so nourishing, yeah.
Oh, that's nice. So you're a cook also. Do you cook anything, or are you vegetarian?
No, we eat everything now. I was
Yeah.
vegetarian for many years, for about 15 years. All the time I was living in Nepal and in
Mhm.
Tibet, which was very difficult because there wasn't a whole lot of food there, apart from like, yeah, roasted barley flour. But about 15 years. And now I mean, we eat very well and very, in the sense of, we're very concerned about what we put into our body.
Mhm.
And so, and then that's pretty much why I cook. I mean, unless I can't make it, unless somebody makes it better in a restaurant than I can, then I don't go out of the restaurant. But like pizza, for example, they always, Italian restaurant, they're always going to do it better than any pizza I can make. Or Thai food. I'm terrible. I
Yeah.
try to make Thai food, but the Italian dishes, I must say, it has to be really good at the restaurant for me not to go there for an Italian dish. So yeah, but we are omnivore, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you do your own pasta?
I do both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have my little it's a
Good
little
mix.
pasta machine like
Yeah.
this, and so to roll that out for my, because, I went to school, where I went to high school in Italy was in Bologna, right? And Bologna, there the noodle from Bologna, the tagliatelle, is like one of the most famous kind of pasta in Italy, and it's definitely made fresh. And where I lived, my host grandmother lived with us, and she made pasta every single day
Oh
except
gosh.
Sunday, of course. And we would buy the pasta then, freshly made. But so I learned from her. She was this short lady, like this tall, and had a little mustache, and her rolling pin for the pasta was like taller than she was.
Um,
And she was amazing. And she taught me, there you put the little flour and the eggs, and then how to knead it and how to roll it and whatnot. So I don't make it often, I
no,
must say.
but it's
But
really nice once you do. It's
yeah,
special. Yeah.
yeah.
So, what happened? Why this fascination with the breath? What happened? And when? When did you find the breath as you have it right now?
Yeah. Well, I told you about the Swedish nun who
Yeah.
put my focus onto the breath and the contemplation of impermanence. I think in terms of a practice,
Mhm.
and seeing and becoming sort of friends with my breath, and then it started there, with her instruction in Kathmandu, and then I took that into, learning the sort of precision of the breathing that we find in yogic breathing with pranayama, because it's very structured, and what to do while you're breathing, and how to use the breath, and then the energy that is created from breathing techniques, how to contain it.
Yeah.
Right? That is to say that we use these, they're called locks or bandhas, and then
Mhm.
you create this sort of energy within you, and then you cap it, whereas you put your chin here, below the Adam's apple, right? And then you're pulling up, from your root chakra, from the perineum, and then you're sucking your belly in, and this concentrates the energy within the sort of energy, the central energetic channel, if you will. And there I was learning in the yogic techniques, but also within Tibetan Buddhism, we do these techniques as well and combine it with visualization. And it's very, very powerful
Mhm.
in a more esoteric way to do these practices, to then, um, we're seeking to incinerate or burn up feelings of greed and anger and
Mhm.
attachment
Mhm.
with these practices, and so it's a different kind of map of our physiology. It's a yogic map. So I took that initial teachings that I got from the Swedish nun, and then it just sort of flowed into the yogic breathing, and the Tibetan breathing techniques that I still use today as my standalone practice. When I sit down and do my meditation practices, these are still very important to me. But when I think back to, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, when I was like 8 or 9 years old, yeah, I was raised Catholic, a good Catholic family, a good hardworking Catholic family in Wyoming, in the Rocky Mountains. As I mentioned, we would always go out to collect our firewood. And when I was 8 or 9, we stopped off one day. We were coming back from visiting my grandparents, and we stopped off, and there was in an old growth forest where it had died out. It was sort of all of these dead trees, and my father was using his
Like
chainsaw.
big trees or
What's that?
big trees?
Yeah, big trees, pine trees, big
Oh,
pine forests. Yeah, lodgepole pine is what it's called. And we had this little. Sometimes these forests they get this beetle, and the
yeah.
beetle like kills the trees. And so a lot of them were dead. And so those are the trees when they fall down, they're already dry and they work well as firewood. And so we would my dad was off in the distance. He was sort of cutting an old tree that had fallen down. He was cutting it with a chainsaw, and my brother was helping stack the wood with him. And I was the younger brother, right? So I
Mhm.
was just like not working. And I was walking off in the forest, and I was looking. There was a little bit of snow, and I was looking for the footprints of the deer and the elk that were. It was fall, so that the animals they moved down, they moved to a lower elevation. And so I was like looking at the ground for these, and as I was looking, I heard this sort of crack or pop, and I turned around, and one of the big trees was falling towards me. The
Oh,
wind had blown it down, and instead of just stepping to the side, letting the thing, I just turned around and ran,
yeah.
and the tree came down on top of me. And it just ripped off the skin from the back of my head to my spine to my backside to the back of my thighs and even the back of my shoes. It ripped off. So just like in a line back, it just ripped off the clothing and just took off the skin as well. And it hit me, and it pinned me to the tree pinned me to the ground. And when I hit, all of the air went out of me.
Oh,
And I remember the sensation of being sort of like hitting the ground, and then, and I remember hearing a chainsaw, and my dog and my dad's dog, our family dog, it was a Labrador, he was barking. I don't know what he's barking at, but I remember hearing the barking and the chainsaw, and then immediately I exited, and I saw. It wasn't like one light, but it was like a ring of light. There was
mhm.
many different rings,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
these like lamps that we have now, these like that you have in front of your computer. There was
yeah.
many of those, and the sound was like you're looking for a radio station, like like it was in outer space or something,
Yeah.
and these lights, and I was just floating towards it.
Yeah.
I was moving towards these like rings of light, and it felt like it was amazing feeling.
Yeah.
It was just and it was just this amazing feeling. I was floating towards this light, and then I heard my name
Mm.
being yelled, like, "Matt, Matt, Matt." My brother called me Matt. "Matt, Matt, Matt." And sort of came to, and immediately I was just filled with pain. My back was on fire, and I was trying to breathe, and I remember the pine needles were, like, coming into my nose, but I couldn't breathe. And I felt my brother trying to pull me out from under the tree, and he was yelling my name, and then all of a sudden, everything just went like a candle was blown out, just poof, and it was dark. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't remember it being dark, I just remember everything just going out, and, what ended up happening, I know now, is my brother ran had to run a couple, like, football pitches away
Mm.
and get
Oh,
my father. And they came back and they lifted the tree off of me.
yeah.
And the next thing I knew was the it was as though my breath breathed me,
Yeah.
right? This it was just this gigantic inhalation. And with that inhalation, I came back.
Yeah.
Like I came back to life. Like that breath and life were like that together.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then it was like my father, he's like, he went to get the first aid kit, and I had, it was pretty, it wasn't, and nothing was broken, but I had scars on the back, my back and my head for many years, for where it just took it. He wrapped me up, like, looked like a mummy in Egypt or something, with bandages. And
Wow,
but that,
you were
now
lucky.
that I think back, that experience of this inhalation brings life,
Mm,
and the exhalation is where we're going.
yeah,
That is where I don't know if that's where my interest of the breath started. Maybe not, but there was something that very visceral that was embedded within me at that
yeah.
time.
When you say it like that, it's like you have a whole life from in one set of breaths,
Absolutely.
right? An inhale and an exhale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only thing, Alex, the only thing we have is
Mm,
that the only thing that is as we're rising with the inhale,
mm,
there's the brief pause, and then we fall with the exhale. And again, there's a brief pause. That is the only thing that is actually, like, that is real, like, at this moment.
mm.
That thing that happened to me when I was 8 years old
Yeah.
isn't anymore. It affects me. There's something within the system, but even that, I'm only experiencing it now.
Yeah.
And going forward, when I think about, like, my last breath, that's just in the future. That isn't here right now.
Mm.
The only thing that is here right now
Is
is
this?
this massaging of me
Yeah.
and the universe at the same time.
Yeah.
There's just this. So,
Is when you
right.
look at, what is it called? The jellyfish in the ocean. They're like, you can see them when they're floating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what our diaphragm is doing. Our diaphragm is this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is when I instruct on breath awareness practice, I oftentimes will say that, like, just place your attention on the breath and feel that it's a slight increase and rising of energy, and then this settling and grounding. So the breath, the inhalation sort of takes us up towards the sky, and the exhalation takes us down into the earth.
Mm.
So there's different ways of, if we want to put a kind of not a story, but if we want to put a kind of image,
Mm.
or feeling onto it, um, there's different metaphors
Mm.
that can be used very beautifully.
Do you also use that in? I love guided meditations and guided breathing techniques. Do you use them in your with a QR code?
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
if you, I mean, if you, I have your email now, but if anybody emails me and just says, I want a guided breathing meditation, I have them already recorded, and I can send them. They're also in the audiobook version, in the English version
Yeah,
of Breathe
that's
How
right.
You Want to Feel, but I have other ones as well. And
Yeah.
so I do
Hmm.
that. I'll and
I'll
I'll
sign
I'll
up.
use some music with it as well.
Nice. So I'm gonna tell you, and you can actually hold me to this in a week's time. Um, I am going away on a trip with my brother on Sunday, and this is my goal. It's to use my breathing in a smart way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
I'm gonna
that's
do
great,
this.
and the way that you can breathe throughout the day, if and for you and for the listeners, if you just remember this, remember, like, how should you be breathing sort of throughout the day? Just remember, because we talked about the pneumonic nasal breathing as a sort of emergency technique.
Yeah.
Like, that's your emergency. Like, if things are gonna get stressful, like, even like right now, you don't have to tell me, Alex, but anybody who's listening, is just think right now, what is the word or phrase you're gonna use? And just recite it to yourself. You don't have to tell me. So now you have that. So That's off your to-do list. You don't have to, you have it. You have your tongue, you have the extended exhale, and you have your word or mantra. So do that for the next 2 or 3 weeks. You don't for the emergency,
Yeah.
right? When things get stressful and you're going to forget it, and then you're going to react in your stress, and you're going to be like, "Oh, wait a second. Alex and Matteo had mentioned this mnemonic nasal breathing." You'll remember like 10 minutes later. It's fine. That's better than nothing. And then
Yes.
that time of 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then in the moment, it will steadily decrease in terms of your emergency technique.
Mm.
And then that's to apply in the moment to stressors.
Yeah.
And then throughout the day, just remember, keep it nasal, right? If there's one thing that you take away from this long conversation is keep it nasal. Breathe through your nose whenever you can,
Yeah.
right? You should breathe through your mouth as frequently as you eat through your nose,
Okay.
right? It's not very often. So keep it nasal. That's the hashtag. Hashtag, that's your mantra. Keep it nasal.
Keep it
So,
nasal.
but then how else breathe light, slow, and deep throughout the day. So keep it LSD. If you need an acronym, LSD breathing, right? Light, it just means that.
Light, slow, and deep. Light,
Yeah,
slow.
light. Yeah, light is just light. So you don't so when you're breathing, you don't even move the hairs inside your nose.
You could actually use that acronym in Swedish as well. So it would be like lätt. It's light. Um,
Slow.
slö. That's slö. It's like when you're lazy, rather.
Mhm.
So, but still, slö and djup. That's the same as deep.
Yeah.
Lätt, slö, djup. Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
And so you can
Good.
just so light is just that. It's just light. It's not, in other words, it's not a powerful breath.
No.
Yeah. So light is that. Slow is just that. It's a very slow pace, right? And deep or diaphragmatic, using your diaphragm, meaning it's just to fill up completely and exhale completely. And this puts our system in a very balanced way. And when we're in a very balanced way, our perspective becomes very wide. We can see what needs to get done. We can still be focused on a task, but we still have the big picture,
Mm.
right? And that's what we want. We want to be able to see the big picture, but know what needs to be done.
Because what happens here is that when you say deep, so light and slow, I get it. When
Yeah.
you say deep, I have to think, okay, what is that? And all of a sudden, I push my breathing downward toward the diaphragm and the belly.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
right?
Because,
'Cause that's what I feel.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know in Swedish, but in English, many people say we should be belly breathing. And
Yeah.
that's not it's okay term. The reason that people say belly breathing, and not to get too far into anatomy, but the diaphragm, when we breathe, the diaphragm contracts and it moves downward. And the reason our diaphragm moves downward is because it's like a suction, like a
Hmm.
syringe.
Hmm.
It's suctioning the air in. It's pulling the air in, and that allows the lungs, it gives space also, allows the lungs and the ribs to expand, and the air comes in. And so the diaphragm moves down. And when that happens, what's below is our intestines, our belly. And
Hmm.
that's why the belly moves outward, because it's being pressed down. Of course, no air goes into the belly, but it presses down because the lungs are expanding.
Yeah.
And then the lungs when they exhale, the lungs deflate and the diaphragm moves back up like this, right? And so this is massaging the belly. Diaphragmatic breathing, and I talk a lot about that in here in the book. Diaphragmatic breathing is massaging our belly, is massaging our liver and our kidney and our heart. It's this internal massage. And so when we learn to belly breathe or diaphragmatic breathe or deep breathing, but deep breathing is a little bit dangerous sometimes, because sometimes when you say, sometimes it's, you will have heard, I don't know in Swedish, but in English, people say, just relax, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And most people, when you say take a deep breath, usually you say that when you're stressed. You tell your friend to do that when they're stressed. they go, okay, which is like not a deep breath. To do that, like when else, if you see that,
Mm.
when else do we do that? It's when we're scared.
Yeah,
If
when we're
somebody like
scared.
jumps in and scares you, you
Yeah.
go, exactly.
Mm.
It's a very short breath. And what does that do? I mean, we've evolved.
Activate. Yeah.
Exactly. And we want to have that
Yeah.
if a polar bear comes in, or if a thief grabs our purse and we need to run
Yeah.
after them, or whatever the case may, we've evolved to be able to act very quickly.
Yeah. The
But
agile.
most of us don't need that during the day. We receive an email from our boss,
Yeah.
or or whatever happens, we read the news and we go, and our body doesn't know the difference
No,
between that email and a polar bear. It
no.
just knows that we've given it a signal to dump a bunch of stress hormones into the system, increase the heart rate.
Mm.
That's like all of these things that happen within the body and our blood to make us ready to
Mm.
fight. But we don't, that's not what we need right now.
No.
We need actually more relaxation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not so much so that we become sleepy and lethargic, but we need to be able to have that perspective to be able to see clearly. Mm, yeah,
That's a really good, like, ending to our fantastic dialogue here, to give us that these two tools for everyday life. If we just do these two to start with, bring them into our everyday life, we are on our way to better health.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex,
Fantastic.
I
Matteo.
very much appreciate your questions, and I really appreciate your like your real interest
Oh,
in the
I am.
breath and becoming friends with your breath, and the community of that we have here with the book club. I love this idea that the book, and then it's being in Swedish, that's amazing, and that we have this Swedish connection
Oh,
with Annie Karen. I'm gonna actually write her and tell
yes,
her. I mean,
please do.
she's getting up there in age, but how amazing that when this is in Swedish, I'm gonna get her a copy of it in Kathmandu, and it will blow
Yeah.
her away. I hope she's quite elderly. I hope she survives. But
Yeah.
when does the book come out?
April 23rd.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I'm gonna get a copy straight away, or have you send
I
it to
need
her
to
in
send it to you
Kathmandu.
once it's coming to our warehouse on April 11th, I think.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And like I said, like I love this idea of breathing together. So if we want to, after the club is like sort of got into the book a little
May
bit
or
and has
something,
questions,
yeah.
then we can come back together. I'm happy to do a guided practice, sort of group practice, and who knows, maybe I can, because the book is just, it was just I published it in English, but the I just heard today like that we have the Swedish rights and the Czech rights and the
Oh,
Spanish rights, and so maybe I come over and do we come over and do we do some
yes,
live
several
events.
countries. Yes, a tour. So, Matteo, the book is fantastic. It's a book that I need, and I am sure if I need it, so many more people will appreciate and need it and use it and to their better health. So,
Wonderful.
thank you so
Yeah,
much
thank
for
you,
writing this
Alex.
book. Yes.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure meeting you here, and but this won't be our last conversation.
No, it won't. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thanks again. So I will let you go and have your wonderful day now. And I'm going to close this shop for today.
Great.
So many thanks again.
Thank you.
Namaste. Bye, Matteo.
Bye-bye.